Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, a free site, bettingangle.us, a free site. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Arthur Beterbiev's performance against Joe Smith was A-level. Although the fight did not make it to the end of the second round, understand Beterbiev, who has 18 knockouts now in 18 fights. He just picked up Joe Smith's WBO light heavyweight title to go with the titles he has. Right? This is a guy who right now is making history. Right? We've had some great light heavyweights. Archie Moore, for example. Michael Spinks, who then went up to the heavyweight division and beat Larry Holmes and beat Jerry Cooney before losing to Mike Tyson. Just understand that you have a great light heavy right now. This was a title unification fight, right? The light heavyweight division is congested. Right now, Anthony Yarde is a mandatory. You have Dmitry Bivol, who just beat Canelo, who many people consider to be on the short list at a minimum of the best fighters in the sport pound for pound. Understand, too, the water is deep. At light heavyweight, you have Gilberto Ramirez. You need to remember that name. He's an unbeaten guy who's trying to get a fight with Bivol right now, right? He has sparred extensively with David Benavidez. You also have Lyndon Arthur, King Arthur, who arguably has the best jab in the division. Now, this has to be said. Many people are going to look at the fight, and it looks uneven. It's a second round KO where Joe Smith, who to me is one of boxing's better fighters, right? A well-deserved champion, one of boxing's bigger hitters. But in a fight where Joe Smith gets dominated, some people are going to say, look, this fight wasn't competitive. This was a blowout. What I want people to realize is Beterbiev is a lot like George Foreman. This is a guy with heavy hands, right? A lot of power in both hands, right? Very heavy-handed. Julio Cesar Chavez, the father, not the son, right? This is a blessed puncher, and he's aggressive. In other words, the opening bell rings, you're on the clock, like Foreman. He will come find you, right? I want people to just understand that the way this fight turned out doesn't mean that Joe Smith isn't a high caliber, high quality, very dangerous opponent. Just like Foreman's fights against Ken Norton, who would later go on to be heavyweight champion, right? Norton doesn't make it to the third round. George Foreman's fight against Joe Frazier, who was a fearsome heavyweight champion who earned the nickname Smoking Joe Frazier, right? Joe Frazier was blowing guys out. Or Foreman's later fight against Jerry Cooney, right? You might recall Cooney KO'd Norton in the first round. George Foreman, in his comeback, right, was still aggressive, was still two-handed, stopped Jerry Cooney in the early rounds. I encourage you to look at those fights. Beterbiev, like Foreman, knows he hits hard with both hands. You hear the shots. That's how hard he hits. And Beterbiev isn't bashful. In other words, if he has an opportunity to hurt you, if he figures you out, he's going to go for it. Now, this fight had some surprises. I want to be as upfront as possible with my audience. First, the gamblers were taken care of on the hedge, right, which was under 8.5 rounds. Folks, this fight didn't make it to the third round. You were never thinking, wow, is this fight going to go over, right? This fight did not make it to the third round. The hedge held. But, to be blunt, many things surprised me. I was expecting Joe Smith to do a lot better. But let's go through it. The first surprise, and this completely caught me off guard, not anything I expected, was beterbiev moving around the ring. Beterbiev on his back foot for the first half of the first round. Folks, it's an eye-opener. Believe it or not, Joe Smith is actually the aggressor at the beginning of the fight. Now, beterbiev has a reputation for being a slow starter. Here, he doesn't get the opportunity to be a slow starter because Joe Smith is trying to bring the action to him. So beterbiev, who hits hard with both hands, understand beterbiev could have made his left hook his meal ticket in the fight, right? But beterbiev's jumping around. Then beterbiev figures out that Joe Smith is throwing a jab, right, from two, put it this way, Joe Smith is too close to beterbiev, and the jab is too lazy. So beterbiev figures out that he can throw his right hook in between Joe Smith's jabs. Now, Timothy Bradley had a spectacular night because Timothy Bradley on the telecast tells you that Joe Smith is throwing his jab the wrong way. He's throwing the jab from mid-range, right? It's not keeping beterbiev from getting close to him. Also, the jab is too robotic. So beterbiev understands as long as Smith is not throwing a left hook, right, something wide that'll keep beterbiev off of Smith's left side, beterbiev realizes that he can just jump over to Smith's left. And as Smith throws the jab, he's defenseless on this side. Now, Smith makes another mistake. Smith doesn't clinch. He doesn't force a clinch early. In other words, he's coming forward. Beterbiev is using lateral movement. That's a theme in this fight. Right? As crazy as it sounds, beterbiev is jumping around. Left side, right side, left side, right side. He's figured out that as long as he moves, Smith can't hit him with the jab. Then beterbiev, who has excellent timing, that's a key part of his game, starts throwing a very heavy right hook. It's a very heavy right hook that Smith is completely unprepared for. Now, if Anthony Yard is watching this video, he needs to realize how advanced beterbiev is. Beterbiev is so far over to Smith's left side that he can't be countered. Smith would have done better abandoning the jab, putting a hand up and just running into beterbiev. Right? Forget about jabbing your way in. Make this a wrestling match. Because by trying to jab, he's leaving himself open for counters, and beterbiev is so far off at the sides that beterbiev is able to load up on the shot without worrying about swinging, missing, and being naked. So you hear, this is even before the knockdown in the first round. We haven't gotten to the second round, where there are two knockdowns. Right? You hear beterbiev's right hook. Right? And he's throwing it at Joe's head. It has thrown Joe off. Joe wants to fight back. He's not clear-headed enough to come in, use a shoulder, guard against the right hook, right? And to come in and almost tackle Beterbiev, right? Make this a mugging. Come inside and try to bracket the guy like Roberto Duran did Ray Leonard in the first fight. In other words, Joe Smith had to make this a wrestling match. Anthony Yard, Lyndon Arthur, the rematch. Right? What he couldn't do was allow Beterbiev to get on the side of him and to load up on hooks. So Beterbiev is hitting him in the side of the head, not the back of the head. It's legal shots. In the side of the head, he has Joe Smith timed. Also, his punches are shorter than Joe Smith's. So Smith, if you're fighting Beterbiev, and Beterbiev is using as much lateral movement as he is, Joe Smith needed to turn, make sure he was facing him, needed to park a hand on the left side of his head, right, which lines up with Beterbiev's right hook, needed to crouch down a little bit more, and needed to come inside with forearms, elbows, trying to push Beterbiev so he could hit Beterbiev. Now, the fight has a couple of clinches, but let's say by then, Beterbiev has learned that he could land that right hook over Joe Smith's jab. Right? Let me just say, too, the end of the first round, Joe Smith should have realized, hey, this guy is hitting me with this punch. I can't recklessly go after him in the corner. It's Joe Smith's aggression that gets him dropped in the closing seconds of the first round. Right? He comes in on Beterbiev, who, of course, by this point has the timing down. The slow starter has figured out the rhythm of the fight. So Beterbiev, predictably, goes to his right outside of what would be Joe's jab, and he hits Joe in the side of the head. Joe goes down. By the time Joe gets back up and then tries to come back across the ring, we're into the second round. Now you'll notice in the second round, Beterbiev at this point is a shark in the water smelling blood. Right? He's throwing that clubbing right hand. And Joe Smith can't do anything to stop it. Right? So then it gets interesting. You notice Beterbiev's back foot is gone. Now he is committed to coming forward. He backs up Smith to the ropes. Now you notice too that while he's been living off of a wide, it's tight, but it's wide. In other words, it's well off at the side of Joe Smith. I would say when Beterbiev's throwing the left hook, he's about, let's say, a foot away from Smith's face, right? On Smith's left side, right? And Smith just doesn't have the bounce, the turn, the ability to take the extra step to make this a wrestling match, to tie up Beterbiev's right hand. But when Beterbiev in the second round gets Smith over by the ropes, you'll actually notice that Beterbiev can throw very straight shots. One of those shots that he hurts Joe with is a straight right hand. In other words, this is a guy who is just throwing what he needs. He has stuff in reserve. Right? Smith ends up being between the ropes. Right? Let's just say by that point, the fight is pretty much over. Smith has been down in the first round and the second round. So then we get to the second knockdown of the second round, right? And you can just sense that Beterbiev now is stronger than Smith. That Smith hasn't fully regained his balance from being knocked down in the first round, right? So, understand, when Joe Smith hits the canvas the second time in the second round, Harvey Dock, who does a great job in the fight, right? Great job. Harvey Dock, when Smith gets up, looks at Smith and says, "Hey, Joe, walk over here for me." Right? Smith actually is able to walk over there. Smith looks like he's together, but you know he's not fully together. Right? He has a poker face on, and he looks like he's together. So then Beterbiev does something that an elite fighter would do. Right? Beterbiev is must-watch boxing. He's better than I thought he was. Beterbiev, who's been feasting, and I mean feasting, on right hooks, right, decides he's going to throw not one uppercut, but two uppercuts. Right? So he comes over to Joe. They're together. It's clear Joe has been hit enough times on the left side of his head that he's conscientious of being hit in the left side of his head. So Beterbiev at this point, the guy who was on his back foot just the prior round, is now in the pocket, and he leans in. He throws a left uppercut. Then he comes back and throws a right uppercut. And Smith is so dazed and confused that he stumbles away and almost fully turns his back to Beterbiev. As soon as he starts to stumble away, Harvey Dock, who no doubt is hearing the thudding punches that Beterbiev's been throwing in the ring, immediately waves off the fight. And as you see Joe lean on the rope, you understand that that was the right call. Right? Dominant performance by Beterbiev. His next fight could be against Anthony Yard. This is a deep division that's been thinned. Right? So now, let's just think about this. Beterbiev could fight Yard next, might fight Bivol after that in another unification match. Right? He's 37. His stamina never got tested here. He had a fighter right in front of him. This is not the Marcus Brown fight, where Marcus Brown's on his back foot and is able to take the first two rounds from Beterbiev. Right here, he had a guy willing to be in the pocket, but Smith's punches were a little bit too long. Smith wasn't quite sure what he was doing with his jab. In other words, Beterbiev is outside. Is Smith trying to keep Beterbiev outside with the jab? Is he just trying to keep Beterbiev busy with the jab? Let's just say, as you watched Smith's jab, it's clear about 90 seconds into the fight that Smith's jab's actually counterproductive, because it's giving Beterbiev a counterpunching opportunity. With Beterbiev's dominant hand, his right hand, Beterbiev is teeing off with hooks to the side of Smith's head. Completely throws off Smith's balance. Right? If your jab isn't keeping the other fighter outside, right? If your jab is giving the other fighter an opportunity to counter you with power shots, you have got to get to plan B faster than Joe Smith did. Right? Joe would have been better off, quite frankly, just parking that left hand on the side of his, head, and then trying to smother the right hook of Beterbiev. Right? Instead, that right hook is a problem for Smith in both rounds. Right? Smith never gets going. Beterbiev is alpha after the first 20 seconds of this fight. Right? Smith cannot stop Beterbiev from moving laterally. Right? I applaud Beterbiev. In my pre-fight video, I said, don't expect a lot of back footwork here. Let me just say flatly, I was wrong. Right? Key on Beterbiev's lateral movement, key on Beterbiev's discovery that he can counter Smith's jab, key on the accuracy of Beterbiev's right hook, key on the fact that Beterbiev is so far over on the side that Smith can't counter him. Understand, there is a moment in the fight in the second round where Harvey Dock actually tells Beterbiev not to hit Smith in the back of the head. That's how far over on Smith's left side Beterbiev is. And understand, Beterbiev is loading up on the shots. It's when a fighter is loading up on shots that you would think they would be vulnerable to get countered. Right here, Smith is looking this way. He's looking straight ahead, while Beterbiev is, let's say, off at, almost a 45-degree angle. That's how I saw the fight. If Beterbiev, again, 18 fights, 18 knockouts, right? He beat a damn good title holder today in Joe Smith. Understand, his prior fight, Marcus Brown, has a punch. Marcus Brown was a difficult matchup. Right? If Beterbiev fights Anthony Yarde next, the boxing world needs to pause for the fight. That's going to be a huge fight. Right? Understand, Anthony Yarde got by Lyndon Arthur's jab in the rematch by walking all the way in the pocket and turning that fight into a wrestling match. And understand, Anthony Yarde has a lot of power and can throw short punches. Here, you can tell Smith's punches are a little bit too long in this fight. I'm sure Smith would fight this fight differently. The winner of the Yarde-Beterbiev fight would then be set up to fight Dmitry Bivol. Right, folks? That would be a classic fight. Right? An absolute classic. Understand, right now there are many, let me raise my hand, who believe Bivol is the best in the division. He certainly showed you that he was better than Canelo. Right? I'm not surprised that Canelo has decided, hey, let me drop down to 168. Right? He must be looking around and he must realize, gee, Beterbiev is different than me. Right? Canelo's incremental. He comes across the ring, he's structured and stuff like that. Beterbiev is like George Foreman. Two-handed power, he believes in his power. He's prepared to throw power shots once he figures out the angles, which in this case took him less than 90 seconds. Right? Don't ignore this division. This is must-see TV. Dominant performance. Absolutely dominant. By Beterbiev. I was grateful that they stopped the fight in the second round, and I was privately rooting for Joe Smith. Right? That's how dominant it was. More knockdowns by Beterbiev than rounds in the fight. Right? You understood here, neither guy was going to be bashful. But even with that expectation going in, you were looking at Beterbiev's aggression, you were hearing the sound of his punches, and you were thinking to yourself, you got to be kidding. If you would have told me before this fight that a guy would actually try back-to-back uppercuts, deep in the pocket on Joe Smith, who'd be unprepared for them, I would have said, no, I don't believe that. I'd have to see that. Well, folks, I've seen it. Right? Also, look at Joe Smith's jab. Something is wrong. Listen to Timothy Bradley when he tells you Joe Smith is not throwing his jab the right way. Think about the crisp jabs you're seeing. Ask yourself some questions. What is Joe Smith trying to do here? Is he trying to keep beterbiev outside? Looks to me like he's trying to use the jab to get inside on beterbiev, but beterbiev isn't allowing a pocket to form. Right? The fighter with the 100% KO percentage is the one using lateral movement. He's going left, he's going right. Right? The only reason, in my opinion, he settles on the right hook is he realizes that Joe Smith won't stop throwing his jab and that he can counter it. So understand, beterbiev is a technician. And once he figured out that his right hook was landing, Smith couldn't stop him from throwing it. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I give Harvey Doc credit too. Smith is knocked down twice by one of the most fearsome punchers in the sport. And Doc understood the significance of the fight. He lets the fight continue. Right? Smith gets knocked down a third time. Doc looks at Smith, right? Asks him to move. Asks Smith if he wants to continue. Smith says yes. The fight continues. In other words, Smith had opportunities. The ref doesn't stop the fight until after Smith is hurt again, 3 knockdowns into the fight. That's how I saw it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Thanks for stopping by.